World War II was one of the most serious and life-changing events in history. It happened from 1939 to 1945 and involved countries all around the world. But it wasn't just a military fight. It changed the way people lived, the way they thought, and the way societies worked. Millions of lives were affected. And the war left a huge emotional impact on everyone who went through it. Naturally, artists reacted to all of this. They tried to express fear, loss, trauma, hope, and strength through their work. Art during and after World War II became a powerful tool, not only to document reality, but also to express feelings that words couldn't describe. Painters, photographers, filmmakers, and even ordinary people used art to express what was happening around them. Many artworks from that era show destroyed cities, suffering civilians, soldiers on the battlefield, but also courage, unity, and the desire for peace. We chose this topic because art created during World War II is not just beautiful or interesting. It carries real stories. It shows human emotions, human choices, and human consequences. Even today, when we look back at those artworks, we can feel what people felt back then: fear, hope, confusion, and strength. Studying this kind of art helps us understand history in a more personal and emotional way. It reminds us that behind every historical event, there are real people with real experiences. In our project, we will explore different artworks and artists whose creations were influenced by World War II.
One thing that is important to understand is that art was not just a propaganda tool in Nazi Germany, it was used as the origin and justification of the regime's racist worldview. The Nazism promoted the myth of the Aryan race as the only truly creative race, claiming that its superiority came from its unique capacity to produce culture. Thus, art became central to the Nazi political project. And so it was believed to be as this quasi-religious force capable of shaping societies and aligning society with Nazi ideals. Hitler believed even that the regime was this dictatorship of art, where his own politics were subordinate to the guardianship and creation of art. Now, the visual aspect of art was fundamental here, because images were prioritized over language. Spectacles, rallies, architecture, films were celebrated, while intellectual criticisms and written language was denigrated. This is because Hitler believed that art should be self-evident and not require so-called instruction manuals, and that the image, the self-evidence, the obvious nature of image was way superior to the distortions that language inherently brought about. Now, this was also very well illustrated in art, because Nazis attempted to retrain the human sensorium with art, drawing on 19th century theories on perception. They were using art to instill the right worldview into people and promote the idealized Nazi propaganda as the objective reality. And this is why the Nazi art was usually in the style of romantic images, and even though images were treated in a realistic manner. However, Nazism explicitly rejected materialism, so this term wasn't often used. Now, images often communicated ideals of racial purity, ideal Nordic beauty, obedience, militarism, and the images of men and women were heavily stereotyped, especially of women. Nude paintings required models to be physically perfect. Nazis communicated themes of traditional gender roles summarized by children, kitchen, church principle. They portrayed peasant, rural German life. They portrayed worship of the homeland, of the Heimat, the struggle, and heroic images were prioritized over sentimental ones. In this case, sculpture became integral to portray Nazi art, because then the nude male figure became the representation of ideal Aryan beauty.
While Nazist regime tried to control people's perception of the world through enabling very certain type of art that depicts the topics that they want people to see, they were also opposing and prohibiting art that wasn't aligned with their philosophy. Any art that wasn't conforming to Nazist ideology was deemed as degenerate. In July 1947, a degenerate art exhibition was held in Munich. Famous artists like Paul Klee, Vasily Kandinsky, and Emil Nolde were present. Their works were present in the exhibition. British artist Robert Medley went to see the show. It was enormously crowded and all the pictures hung like some kind of provincial auction room where the things had been simply slapped up on the wall regardless to create the fact that this was worthless stuff, he says. As he already mentioned, they were specifically creating exhibition in a way so the art were deemed worthless. They were also surrounded by the paintings made by psychotic patients and a huge amount of graffiti to underline that this type of modernist art is affirming racial impurity, mental illness, or lack of morality. Despite the Nazis offending many artists and deeming their way of expression wrong, some artists were even inspired to respond and create even more modern art. And one of the examples is Oskar Kokoschka, who created the self-portrait of degenerate artists in 1937, the moment he got the news that 8 of his paintings were placed in the degenerate art exhibition. Here we can see Kokoschka with his arms crossed, and there is a landscape. There is a landscape with a forest behind him. If we look close enough, we can see here an abstract figure that resembles a walking or running person. And on the right corner of the painting, if you look closely, you will see a stag. Both of the symbols can be interpreted as Kokoschka telling how he feels hunted and chased after in the Nazist regime, which he was trying to escape at that year. So, in a way, Nazist regime calling art degenerate provoked people to create even more modern art and express themselves.
When speaking about World War II, it is impossible not to mention the Holocaust, or in that case, art that is connected to it. First of all, let's take a few seconds to understand what Holocaust is. Holocaust was the anti-Jewish campaign initiated and implemented by the Nazi Germany during the years 1933 to 1945. During that period, almost 6 million Jewish people were killed, and afterwards, during the Holocaust and afterwards, a lot of artists were inspired by the Holocaust to create art pieces that later served as a proof of crimes of the Nazis. I would like to mention one really significant museum that is called Yad Vashem, and that is located in Jerusalem. Yad Vashem is considered to be the biggest museum about the Holocaust, and that contains Holocaust era art. Overall, there are almost 14,000 Holocaust era related paintings and overall artworks. The majority of those artworks, they were created during the Holocaust by the victims of it. They were finding some small pieces of paper, some materials, whatever they could find to depict all of the horrors that they have seen. Alfred Kantor was Czech-born Jewish artist and Holocaust survivor. One of his most significant works is the book of Alfred Kantor, which contains 127 sketches, each of them depicting his own life experience from anti-Semitic movements in Prague in 1941, imprisonment in 3 concentration camps, and the torture of Jewish people in Auschwitz. Each sketch contains a few sentences explaining what is happening on the picture. So, for example, on that one we can see how a prisoner receives a piece of bread from his wife. Most likely those sentences were added in case the author doesn't make it out alive, so it would be more understandable. The next painting I feel obliged to speak about is The Refugee by Felix Nussbaum. Even though the painting was created in 1939, so before the official start of the war, anti-Jewish movements were already there. And on this painting we can see a man in despair. We can see that he has his belongings. There is nothing in the room except for a long table and this huge globe. And this whole room, it looks like a jail. And for the author, the meaning was that he feels desperate on the eve of World War II, and he understands that for Jewish people there is no escape.
During war, many artists were persecuted because of their identity, their beliefs, or simply because their art didn't fit the regime's ideology. Yet despite fear and oppression, they used art to document their inner world, their fear, hope, and resistance. I want to talk about three artists whose works visually capture what persecution feels like.
Felix Nussbaum painted while hiding, knowing that any day could be his last. In self-portrait with Jewish identity card, the first thing you notice is his expression, tense, hollow, and exhausted. His face looks as if he is already anticipating arrest. The background is dark and empty, symbolizing how the world had collapsed around him. The most painful detail is the identity card he is holding. It practically replaces his identity as a person. Instead of showing who he is, it shows what the Nazi system reduced him to, a category. The painting feels like a quiet scream, and only months later, Nussbaum was arrested and murdered. His work becomes a visual prophecy of his own fate. While Nussbaum shows persecution through a single haunting self-portrait, Charlotte Salomon takes a completely different approach. She turns her entire life into art. Charlotte Salomon created over 700 gouache paintings in exile. Her style is bright, colorful, and almost theatrical. That's exactly the point. In one of her many famous scenes, she painted herself walking through a street flooded with deep reds and blues. The colors felt warm at first, but the more you look, the more you notice how chaotic and disorganized the composition is. Figures overlap, text surrounds the characters, and everything looks like a memory collapsing into itself. The visual chaos reflects her mental state: fear, movement, dislocation. She paints her world as if it's slipping away, while she is desperately trying to hold it together. Salomon was eventually deported and killed at the age of 26, but her visual diary remained one of the most emotional personal documents of the Nazi era. If Nussbaum gives us fear and Salomon gives us fragmentation, Jacques Lipchitz brings something different: the raw physicality of resistance. Lipchitz was a Jewish sculptor forced to flee Europe. His sculpture Prometheus straddling the vulture turns myth into protest. Prometheus, the figure who brings fire to human, is shown twisting his entire body in a violent struggle. His muscles look almost broken, and the composition is so tight that the sculpture feels like it's suffocating. This isn't just mythology. The vulture represents fascism, and the Prometheus represents the persecuted artist fighting against it. You can feel the intensity in the way that the lines twist, the way that the forms are packed together like trapped energy. It's a sculpture of anger, resistance, and the desperate will of survival.
It is important to talk about Soviet art when we talk about World War II, because war greatly inspired artists at that time. And art was no longer about aesthetics for artists at that time, because it was more like a tool for propaganda of patriotism, for documenting history even by those who witnessed everything by their own eyes, and for keeping people hopeful and united. One of the most important wartime paintings at that time was Fascist Flu by Arkady Plastov, who was a realistic painter from his village who depicted real-life battleship happenings in his paintings. The painting Fascist Flu shows, it seems like it shows a simple autumn naturalistic painting, but it's actually that boy who was killed by a fascist plane who was flying away in the background, and his dog howling by his side. The bluish and green and yellow-brown tone colors show the true sadness and tragedy of the war. And even though this painting shows that people die for nothing, even children, during the war, it actually gives hope to people and shows that no matter what happens, they will survive this war. Now what I'd like to mention is the Test Windows project, which was a huge artistic propaganda where more than top 100 artists created hand-painted posters and hung them on shop windows. They used acrylic paint, gouache and stencils to create those hand-painted posters. These were produced daily and even hourly, reacting to the news from the front. Every passer would stop and try to understand the meaning which was behind the posters, which was usually no to war and fascism. These posters were usually divided to two categories, heroic and satirical. In the satirical ones, usually Hitler was depicted, which made a huge impression on every passer. During the 900-day Leningrad siege, where there was famine and harsh winter, art exhibitions were held sometimes during the blockade to show simple paintings of artists who created art even during those harsh conditions.
Elena Martila, an 18-year-old art student, unfortunately didn't show her drawings in those exhibitions, but she drew everything and everyone she saw in her diary using any materials she could find. And usually she drew ordinary people, showing their struggles.
And after the war, she was even ordered to destroy her artworks, but she didn't, because she wanted to preserve everything she witnessed, the ordinary people, the simple lives of people during the blockade. And actually it's really great that she did that, because now we have proof that people actually cared and created art even during those harsh conditions.
After looking at different artworks together, we understand that World War II did not produce just one type of art with one single message. Rather, many different artists responded to the events happening around them in many different ways, depicting human emotions such as fear, loss, survival, and hope. From Nazi propaganda degenerate art to Soviet wartime era paintings and Holocaust drawings, art was a way of representation, a mirror that reflected society's daily sufferings. What connects all of the discussed art together is the fact that during World War II, art was not neutral or free. It was censored, it was controlled, it was used as a political weapon, or it was used as an act of resistance. In Nazi Germany, art was used to influence people and had to follow very strong ideological rules. Artists who did not follow those rules were persecuted, threatened, or pushed out of society, and they were also labeled as degenerate. Despite those harsh conditions, many artists still chose to disobey these rules and create art. And those artworks later became very strong symbol of resistance and resilience. They made sketches, paintings, and self-portraits where they depicted real human emotions such as fear and anger, but also freedom. And this all formed a very strong form of protest art. Holocaust art shows how art can be used to tell a story and preserve memory. Artists like Alfred Kantor were not aiming for artistic recognition, but for living evidence of their experiences. Creating artwork in concentration camps is especially powerful and emotional because it makes the art come from personal trauma and personal experiences. Soviet wartime art shows how artists respond to war in both public and private ways. Propaganda posters were created to inspire unity and strength, while sketches from the siege of Leningrad show people's daily sufferings. What inspires us most about this art created in this period is how personal and real they feel. They are not meant to be beautiful in the traditional way, but they are meant to depict real human emotions, and learning about World War II art makes us appreciate artistic freedom more and makes us understand that artists use their artwork to respond to everything that is happening around them.